Oh man, it's been a while. Back like I never left. And I clearly did leave. I did. Broke Boy Sports Podcast is back. I think it's been like a week and a half or 2 weeks or something like that. It's been too long. It really has been. If you didn't know, or you don't follow me on like social media and stuff like that. Actually, it didn't even matter if you follow me on social media because I didn't post it there. U.S. Quidditch Cup 2022, which is like the national championship tournament for Quidditch, is coming up. I'm sorry. Oh shit. Game of Thrones just dropped a trailer for House of Dragon. Okay, interesting. But yeah. Anyway, I drove from Houston to Salt Lake City, Utah, and then I played in a tournament for 2 days, and it took me 2 days to get back. So I left last Thursday. Has it been a week? Yeah. So I left last Thursday. No, wait, that was a while ago. Hold on. Sorry. So I left April 20th. Yeah. No. That's not what happened. That is what happened. Wow, it's been a while. Sorry, let me get this clarified. I left April 21st. Drove to Lubbock, Texas. That took me 8 hours from Lubbock, Texas to Houston to Lubbock. And then from Lubbock on April 22nd, I drove all the way to Salt Lake City, Utah. And I did not get in until like 10:30 at night. And it was terrifying because I was driving down a mountain. And in the process of driving down the mountain, there was a rainstorm and a snowstorm. And then also, when I was driving through New Mexico, there was a dust storm right before I got to Colorado. Plus, there was a wreck of two 18-wheelers because of the dust storm. And that is how I ended up being 2 hours late to the place I thought I was going to get to at like a reasonable time or whatever. And luckily for me, on my way out, because we played April 23rd and April 24th, I drove back. I started my drive back Monday, April 25th. Got to Lubbock. It took me way longer than 14 hours. Well, no, it took me like 15 hours, which is unashamable because the harder portion of the drive was there. And the harder portion of the drive was driving through Utah, which was cool because it was the prettier part of the drive, and then driving through New Mexico, driving through Colorado to get to New Mexico, and then from New Mexico into Texas back to Lubbock. I got to Lubbock at like 3:00 in the morning. Shout out my teammate Mary Stewart, who put me up for a couple days in Lubbock. Actually, not a couple days. She let me crash at her place like a couple hours because I went to sleep at like 3 or 4 a.m. or something, and then we woke up and we got coffee. And then I drove the rest of the way back to Houston and got back at like 9 o'clock because I stopped to get food like multiple times. And I wanted to get home before it got dark. And I got home right when I felt like the sun had gone completely down, which is the 26th. Wednesday, I worked. Thursday, I worked. And then I had tryouts for the final tryouts for the League City Legends that I ran on April 30th. So that's why I didn't do that. And then I had to select the roster and get in contact with like way too many people who are different, like people who have social media accounts and gave me their phone numbers, but like refused to answer on any of those platforms until like hours later after initially contacting them, which was fun. So I spent all of April 30th and May the 1st working on getting the roster together for the League City Legends. Had to turn it in. Well, my general manager, Joan Alexander, had to turn it in, I want to say May 2nd or something like that. So the last couple days I've been working on this podcast that we're about to do right here and power through. So shout out. By the way, we're back on Spotify. iHeartRadio, Deezer, and all that kind of stuff like that. I took some time to assess whether or not it was actually worth my money to continue to put the podcast out on those different platforms. And you guys know my side gig is that I'm an Uber driver, and a lot of people ask to listen to my podcast. And when they ask, I tell them that I do it on YouTube and Twitch, and they're like, oh, I listen on Spotify all the time. So we'll see if they truly do listen. I would like to point out we got a follower a month ago. Shout out to our new follower, Pagode. I think I know who that is, but you never know. You never know. Person I know in real life. Oh man, Playa Society. If you don't follow them on Twitter, good for you because they'll take all of your money. They just dropped some WNBA merch and it looks sick. Looks dope as hell. I would love to get those shorts. That would be they're probably already sold out. They always are sold out. Anyway, let's go. We're about to do social media stuff and then get the show popping, man. Like the show popping for the first time in a while on different platforms. Let's get it going. I might only tweet out the YouTube link, to be honest with you. Let's see if we're even live on YouTube right now because I'm on the channel. Okay, we are. Just making sure. It's good to be back. Making sure. All right, you can hear me because that's me echoing into my own microphone. Control A, Control C, copy that. I understand that the NBA playoffs are going on right now. As a matter of fact, your boy has it on the TV screen that you're not able to see because you're looking at my wonderful face. Sports. Oh, my bad. Oh. This is annoying. YouTube and Twitch. Let's go. Control V. I copied. Let's go here. Oh, damn. God damn. Is Whips back? Somebody just tweeted at me the game Whips. I tweeted about how I wanted to play. I tweeted about how I want to play Wingspan because I just found out that it is online. Did not know that. If you don't know what Wingspan is, don't worry. It's like the nerdiest of nerd games. It is a battle game based off of birds, like in real life and shit like that. So, not actually worth your time, but I have a lot of fun. And if you play it and you found the joy out of it, let me know because I'm down. I'm down to play. Down to ball, bro. Sorry, I gotta pull up Twitch real quick. By the way, we're killing it right now because we have not skipped a single frame. Shout out to everybody who's making that possible at twitch.tv. I appreciate you because the worst thing is to have a stream like this today. Oh, we got a notification. Okay, that was weird. Anyway, we got a notification about something happening. I had 2 concurrent viewers on my last live stream. By the way, the last thing that's in the way of me being able to apply for being an affiliate is for 3 people to watch the stream live concurrently. I know there are people out there who like to check out the show after the show is over with. If you could check out the show when it's live, and I will do a better pod. What's up, Kevin? Quit Kevin hopping into the chat, man. We are back after a long delay, and we are gonna get stuff popping off here in a second. We've only been live for like 8 minutes, but we're gonna go live on the podcast stuff. Call up some friends. I do not call up friends. You know what I want to do? My goal is to make it happen organically. We'll see. I have to do a good enough job to entertain the people. Let's see. Kevin, you don't need to do that. How about you just sit back and enjoy the show, my guy? By the way, we are up big time ever since that appearance that we had. In terms of followers, that appearance that we had on Barry on Sports, which is pretty dope, man. By the way, go follow Barry on all of his Twitter accounts and stuff like that. We got into like a stupid argument about whether or not Derek Stingley Jr. was actually a good pick for the draft because he doesn't. In his mind, injuries are injuries as opposed to what injuries actually are. People have freak things that happen to them consistently. So, for instance, Derek Stingley Jr. had like an ankle injury that he chose to play on multiple times, and then it turned into ankle surgery, and so he missed a bunch of time and also did not play well because of the ankle injury and all kinds of stuff like that. He also had a freak injury that happened to him in practice where like somebody broke a bone in his body. That's not something that you can bank on happening when you get to the NFL, right? Like freak stuff like that is not what people would consider to be in the category of injury prone, right? So that's my point that I was making, and Barry was just kind of like, I don't care. Like, he's hurt. If he's in it, he's in. If he's in it, he's not in it. And I'm like, that's not. We got to be a little bit smarter. We got to be smarter than that. And I know he is smarter than that. It's just one of those things where it's like difficult to convince people. of the logic of things. Wow. Okay. All right. No free advertisement. Thanks, Twitch, for as soon as somebody clicks onto your website, you immediately start blasting audio. That's a great way to keep people around. Apparently, Twitch is like, once again, not high enough up in the food chain on Twitch to get people's attention and stuff like that, to know how to really deal with the whole situation. But a lot of people are talking about Twitch has got a flawed format, and I'm like, all right, man, whatever. I really don't care. I'm just going to keep doing my stream on here until it's over. That's why I try and stream on as many platforms as possible at one time. As a matter of fact, I was looking into streaming on Facebook while the show was like simulcasting using OBS to stream on Facebook at the same time, because, you know, I got like 7,000 Facebook friends or some shit like that, or not 7,000, like 1,000 Facebook friends. I think I can figure out how to get some of them to tune and click on my live stream, especially since live streams are easier. Yeah, Facebook intentionally sets you up for failure in terms of like avoiding shit, like avoiding rogue audio. They do a terrible job of preventing that from happening. NBA playoffs 2022. What else are we talking about? We talk about F1. Actually, we talk about Miami. There it is. Miami GP, baby. Yeah, that's right. We talk about Miami GP. We talking about the W. We talking about the W tonight. If you don't know, now you know. What other sport? Oh, we talking about boxing? Yo, we out here. We out here tonight, baby. We doing it. We tearing it up. Honestly, man, most of this stuff is like such quick opinions, and of course, you guys know that I talk way too fast. So, did I ever tell you guys about that time I went to a cigar lounge and a guy told me that like the way I talk was too excitable and I needed to calm down when I speak? And I was just kind of like, you sound like, that is like the oldest old man thing I've ever heard a person tell me. And he was like, yeah, like I got like a heart attack during, he's like, I had a heart attack because somebody was having a conversation and it was too excitable for me and it triggered like a reaction to my heart. And I was just like, I'm really sorry that happened to you, because heart attacks like really do suck. Like, as a person who's never had one, every person I've ever met that's ever had a heart attack tells me that it sucks. So, and also it doesn't take that much brain power to process. They're like, heart attack's bad. That's why people go in the hospital for them. Anyway, he was telling me I talk too much. And I was just like, whoa, bro. Like, it was a really weird thing to say to another person, in my opinion. You tell me, folks watching at home, was that weird for you to say, for somebody to say that to another person about like, hey man, like you talk like too excitedly and I don't enjoy that. And I'm like, that's really weird. Ooh, MLQ roster thread. By the way, shout out to everybody who made MLQ rosters across the country, actually across America and across the United States of America. Oh man, that's funny. Somebody already picking up on like the guys who basically are staying in Texas but like moving around to different teams. You know, you gotta hustle a little bit harder. I'm kidding. Shout out to New Orleans curse up. I think we should get the show underway. We should do that because, you know, we're adults. And oh man, somebody wrote something on Discord, which by the way, did not realize how annoying Discord is as an app. Kind of wild. Cannot tell you how fucking annoying Discord is in terms of its notifications. Some people like live on that app, and that's wild to me. Episode 188. Actually, let me just copy and paste my YouTube description. Oh wait, you can't copy and paste on Spreaker, because you know that's what a good app does, right? Like, it doesn't allow you to copy and paste things. Anyway, all right, folks, we got all the social media stuff out. It's time to get it popping, baby. All right, going live in 3. Live. We're already live, but you know, the other live. 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, Boys and girls and everybody else in between, I'm Ashton G. Lewis. This is the Broke Boys Sports Podcast. And yes, you're hearing my voice again. I know it's been a while. I'd like to formally apologize. Thank you for the people who are sticking around and coming back to the show, whether it be in the distant future or in the near future, which would definitely benefit me in my ultimate evil scheme of getting a $100 million podcasting contract and then as soon as the money hits my bank account, immediately quitting podcasting and disappearing. Or maybe my ultimate real, you guys know why, like, the real scheme is, right? Like I say that that's my ultimate goal when it's all said and done, but my real scheme is to get so popular on this podcast that I don't have to work anymore, and then use the leverage of this podcast to be able to go to live sporting events for free for the rest of my life. That's like the real goal, like when it's all said and done. Anyway, we got people in the chat already. Shout out Quick Kevin, who's a dedicated listener to the show just in general. But yeah, that's the ultimate evil scheme. But I can't say that out loud too many times or people will think I'm weird, right? All I want to do is be able to go to stuff for free. Oh, and I would also like to be able to buy my mom like a sick house and a sick car. So if you want to help with that, you can do a couple of real simple things. Follow me across every social media platform that I'm on, which two of them are on the left-hand side of the screen if you're at home watching on either YouTube or on Twitch, which is at FB_playbook. That is my Twitter account. And then at the Ashton Forever, which is my Instagram account, which, by the way, I don't know what your boy's been up to, but apparently I've been doing something right. 3 Olympians in the past like couple months, which has me worried that I'm in some kind of weird group chat, and I don't know if they're saying good things or bad things about me, but I'm in like I've had 3 different Olympians from like actual Team USA follow me on Instagram. And I like don't know what to do with that information or about that information, to be honest with you. I reached out to one of them. She's a Team USA rugby player, and I asked her to like come on the show. And I think I actually know what happened. There was a TikTok that I did about my man boobs, and it was a TikTok that I stitched, which is when you take somebody's video and then like you play like 10 seconds of it, and then you put your spin on the back end of it. I did that in I think it was not Ilhan Omar, but she got like super popular during the Olympics or whatever. She did one about, she asked like people with big titties, what's it like? And then I did one about like, what's it like to be a dude with big titties? And then a couple weeks later, a Team USA rugby player followed me. So maybe that has something to do with it when it's all said and done. Either way, I don't really care how I got the follow. I hit her up to come on the show, and she looked at it, didn't respond. Totally reasonable response for an adult to be like, wow, I followed this guy on Instagram and he instantaneously asked me to come on his show. Really weird, bro. And I agree. Very strange, but you got to risk it for the biscuit. I put it out there and I got rejected, but you bet your ass and I'm about to ask this bobsledder from Team USA who followed me the other day if she will come on this podcast, because you never know, man. First of all, every Olympian has like a crazy story. It's never just like, oh yeah, like I picked up this sport when I was like 4 years old and then I was immediately the best of all time in America at it. There's always some kind of wild aspect to everything that they do and their journey across the world to play typically a sport that's not like all that mainstream in the country that they come from or in America overall. Shout out to everybody who gives your boy an opportunity to go out there and fail. I appreciate that. To the Olympians who continue to follow me, despite the fact that I'm 100% going to slide in your DMs, not for anything other than a simple 20-minute interview. Because that's what your boy wants most in this life right now. I need to get as much interviewing on this show as possible, because that's what drives people's attention. That's how you get into other people's social media networks. And there's a comb randomly in the frame right now. That's how you get into other people's social media networks, and that's how you actually get to talk to like athletes who do cool shit. Like everybody wants to talk to, the same like 20 people, right? They want to talk to like the greatest of all time, and I'm like, bro, like every professional athlete has a wild ass story as to how they became a professional athlete. And I want to hear it. I love me a good story. I really do. Moving on, we got a couple of segments that we're going to pull off here, right? We got a couple of segments that we're going to go through here. I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't do all the glitz and glamour because I just wanted to get out here and do the pod, right? I spent a lot more time doing research on this kind of stuff and working on the script and what I was going to say, as opposed to like actually doing the graphics for each one of the segments. So we're just going to dive right into it. We're going to start off with nerd news, ladies and gentlemen. It's actually geek news. We rebranded because like nerds would be like implying science and other things like that. Geekdom implies what it actually means, because a lot of people conflate those two terms, but if you actually know geeks, they're mostly really dumb. There is some overlap between the nerd, geek, and another community that I'm not going to call out on this podcast, the kink community. Anyway, the geeks out there in the world will appreciate this. This is usually a topic where I take time to talk about like a video game or a book or a movie that's coming out, and today it's going to be a video game. So WWE, some of you, maybe you've heard of it, the most famous wrestling promotion on the face of the planet, like legitimately more famous and popular than freestyle, like Olympic wrestling in this world that we live in right now. They're working on an RPG, a role-playing game where... Okay, so a role-playing game can obviously take on many different forms, but the fact of the matter is that there is an aspect, and there is definitely a market of people out there that would love to play a game where they get to be a WWE superstar. In years past, that has been a thing, an option, especially when 2K, because 2K knows that you can generate a shit ton of money off of a couple of things when it comes to putting them in the games. One of them being like the Ultimate Team version. I don't know how they did that version for WWE, because 2K Labs has had the WWE contract for the past couple of years, which that 2K, the one that does like NBA, NHL, and they do not do NBA, but they're working on an NFL football simulator, they say, or whatever. We'll see what happens. But nonetheless, the WWE contract is going to be huge, because like if there's a collection of people that are into sports that overlap with the collection of people that are also, they like entertainment at a super high level, and there's one thing you can talk about. I can sit here and talk to him blue in the face about how like things I don't like about Vince McMahon, like as a guy, right? He said some kind of wild. He said some. Obviously, he's like super conservative, and supports a certain person that I, quite frankly, can't support in any way, shape, or form, no matter what happens. He has a lot of things that he does a lot of things that I disagree with. One thing I can't disagree with, he knows how to make some money. That's always been true about Vince McMahon, and if there's one thing he can go to his grave knowing, is that he knows how to make money, which takes a deep understanding of human beings, which is like an important aspect of life, right? The WWE franchise, though, has always really struggled with getting... I will say this, a lot of people really do enjoy the WWE video games. One, because they get to create their own... They get to add their own spin and their own type of drama. But to get a real, like, wrestling experience, you got to be able to be in a position where you start from, like, the ground up, because there's a lot of hit and miss when it comes to wrestling. And there's a lot of levels before you get to become a WWE superstar. That is literally making it to the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, in some cases, making it to the Premier League in terms of soccer. That is the cream of the crop. And even those guys are fighting tooth and nail to get to the top of the WWE, like Roman Reigns is right now in the world that we exist in currently. It's important to have a game that is going to be open world, which means it needs to be handled by like one of these studios that has done a gigantic open world game before. There has not been an announcement as to what studio is going to get this contract, because it is going to be huge. The WWE has been really working towards, and honestly, pushing very, very fervently towards a model of success. They had their own WWE TV network for a little while, and then that kind of collapsed because they figured out that people were not willing to pay a monthly subscription for WWE stuff, especially when they could latch onto one of these streaming services where they could get a guaranteed amount of money paid to them based off the number of subscribers that they generate, and also have the WWE platform and the pay-per-view still get individual paydays, right? Like they need people to be in a situation where to enjoy the product, they get some for free, and then they pay for a big thing at the end. That's why WrestleMania is now a 2-day event, right? Because there's so much media around it. There's so much entertainment. WrestleMania gets Super Bowl level coverage in the sports world at times, and it's kind of wild, especially on the podcast circuit. That's a big deal. Podcast radio, And sometimes it leaks on the TV, but for the most part, these podcasts that people listen to on a daily basis, these podcasts that people listen to, I would say more frequently than regular radio shows, these podcasts that can take clips of their video segments and put them out on the internet. Wrestling is all about that. They get into the sports community because the sports community's always loved wrestling. The Pivot podcast just recently had Ric Flair on to talk about the passing of his son and how that has impacted his life and his goals as a wrestler and as a human being. That's a massive part of what the WWE does. That's a huge part of what the game has to encompass as well. There has to be an aspect of this has to be the most open world sports game ever, and that's saying a lot because Skate 2 exists, Tony Hawk's Underground Skater exists, SSX exists, right? There has to be pitfalls available. There has to be some just unruly, grimy stuff that is available. It would be even cool if you could pick a time era when you're trying to rise up to become a superstar, because it took different things to become a superstar at different points of professional wrestling. And of course, this all comes down also to what leagues they can get not even verification from, but what leagues they can get clearance for to represent in the show, because the WWE is the top of the wrestling world, right? The wrestling entertainment world. But to get to the WWE, you got to go through all these different channels, and I'm sure they're going to figure something out, because now the WWE is clearly making more money than they ever have before, and they might be willing to splurge a little bit. And honestly, sometimes I forget what names and titles that they own that they just hold on to so that other people can't use them, which is a thing that Vince McMahon does with like the actual names of wrestlers that are in the WWE, so that they can't go to other promotions and take the hype that was built around that name in the WWE and take it to like NXT or ECW, which is the old school, obviously old school promotion that used to exist. That used to be competition for at one point for the WWE. And, of course, AEW won't be involved in this and all that kind of stuff like that. And a lot of people really like AEW or whatever. But I think it's huge if they can do it right. And they've really struggled, other than like the ring mechanics, in terms of like the WWE, they've really struggled to get like what it takes in the path to becoming a WWE wrestler correct. Because there's so many different paths that people can take in terms of like, in terms of the spectrum, right? There's entertainer here on the left-hand side, which is like if you're on this far end of the spectrum and there's like no athleticism involved whatsoever, which is the part over here, the wrestling skill. If you're on this part of the spectrum, you're like a manager, in which a manager can have a huge role in how a star gets over in terms of entertaining the crowd and raises their profile. And then there's the guys who are over here who have all the athleticism in the world, off camera over here, have all the skills. They can do the triple backflips in the air. They can do all the tricks. They can power through all the pain and all that kind of stuff like that. But they don't have what it takes to draw the crowd in. They don't have the things that entertain the crowd and gets them to come back week after week to see what they have to offer, right? That's a huge part of it as well. And it's hard to capture that within the spans of video game, especially if you are trying to stick to what previous sports games have done in the past. I think so often we need to address the fact that the WWE lives in a unique space, in the sense that they are very 100%, without question, top tier athletes that compete in the WWE on a regular basis. We also need to be fully accepting of the fact that the results are predetermined for the sake of a storyline to entertain the people at home. Things happen that are 100% planned. Despite what all the, like, I kid you not, when I worked at SB Nation Radio, there was this one guy, his name was Richard in West Virginia, and I will never forget his name. He used to call in all the time with the dumbest sports takes. And he knew that he was harassing the shit out of producers or whatever. You would put him on the call line, you would tell the host, they would roll their eyes and be like, just leave him there. And they would make you leave Richard on hold, and he would keep calling back. So the hold line had like a max time of you can only be on hold for like an hour, and then it hangs you up or whatever. And he would sit there on hold waiting and ready. And I don't know if it was like it was obviously the only thing that Richard had to do in his life, because he called during different time slots. He was the most dedicated listener to SB Nation Radio, and we all despised Richard calling because he was a terrible caller. He used to call into the station to say the same thing every single time. He was also a guy who believed that wrestling was real. I couldn't tell if he was trolling or anything like that, but I had a conversation with him one time. He was like, oh man, WrestleMania is coming up this week. Maybe we should talk about it. And honestly, Richard may have been ahead of his time because WrestleMania is now something that sports talk radio shows 100% embrace. Like, one of the biggest sports talk radio shows in the country has a guy who is the 24/7 champion, Mike Greenberg, right? Not Mike Greenberg. Who's the guy on Ebro in the Morning? Hold on, let me look it up real quick. Ebro in the Morning co-host. He is Jewish. That's why I said Mike Greenberg. Because I think it is. Am I crazy? Am I losing it? Anyway, Mike Greenberg is, of course, like, Mike Greenberg, Mike and Mike of Mike Greenberg. Anyway, Ebro in the Morning co-host, Peter Rosenberg. That was not even close. Mike Greenberg and Peter Rosenberg, not close. Peter Rosenberg, he works on, not Mike and the Mad Dog. He works on like the biggest active New York sports talk radio show. And the guy's like the guy that he works with is the play-by-play host for play-by-play broadcaster for the Yankees. And he was the 24/7 champion for like 8 hours, which, by the way, if you don't know what the 24/7 belt is, it is a recent invention of the WWE. It is a championship that is basically, it's set up to be held by celebrities so that the WWE can, once again, break into other people's social networks, right? So at one point, Bad Bunny had it, he lost it, and then it was taken back from a wrestler. A wrestler always takes it back, and I think it's actually a huge pop for a wrestler if you're the person that takes it from like a superstar or whatever kind of deal going on, because Rob Gronkowski got it one weekend and had it taken by like Tuesday or something like that. He showed up and he was at he was at WrestleMania that weekend because it was like Super Bowl weekend in Miami, and he showed up and won the 24/7 championship. Peter Rosenberg won the 24/7 championship and had it on during his radio show. And of course, the radio show is on multiple TV stations across the country, and it's on and it's on air at a lot of places too. So he's doing the show, and then somebody comes up and they hit him with a wrestling move, and they take his belt and run off the balcony of his house kind of deal. And it's he loses the 24/7 championship on air. It always happens on air, by the way, because it's intended to be seen by the folks, to be entertainment and bring entertainment value and figure out a way to like rope celebrities into doing what they've all like, because every modern day celebrity has at some point or another had a fascination with professional wrestling, because it is truly either the entertainment aspect of it or the actual wrestling itself, because they are a mix of high-level entertainers and high-level performers, which is a hard thing to find if you couldn't tell, because if it was easy, there'd be way more wrestling federations out there that have existed this long. And anyway, I mentioned all of that story to talk about the WWE potentially setting up a role-playing game, which I can only hope is approached not as a sports game, but as a actual open-world role-playing game where you are a wrestler and you have to grind your way to the top from ballroom showcases and stuff like that, and actually the stuff that happens before that, like fighting or like doing shows in a parking lot and like traveling all over the country and all kinds of events, instead of like a controlled storyline where there's only like 10 possible outcomes when it's all said and done, and there's no risk of failure. Like, there's always a net to stop you from completely falling off the cliff. Anyway, we move on, ladies and gentlemen. I digress. I move on. If you had some things to say about the WWE and their new potential video game, hit me up. My only point is that it can't be like My Player in NBA 2K, because My Player depends upon a set prototype of a basketball player that is successful. Best of the best, though. As you guys know, I build this show as the best and the worst that sports has to offer every single week, except the weeks that I took off. The best and the worst that sports has to offer every single week. This week, best of the best is Lewis Hamilton. If you have no idea who Lewis Hamilton is, I guess you've been under a rock. He is considered to be the GOAT. Statistically and just like structurally right now, he is a Mercedes-Benz F1 driver, and he is the GOAT of Formula One racing. This upcoming weekend, Formula One is in Miami, and every fanboy that's just recently jumped onto the F1 bandwagon because of the Netflix show is like jizzing their pants. Anyway, Lewis Hamilton has a situation. Miami, well, I guess it's Florida. The Sporting Commission in Florida doesn't allow you to drive with jewelry on. Lewis Hamilton has come out and said that he is going to not drive this weekend if they don't adjust the rule or give some kind of exemption for him to be able to wear his chain and also wear his piercings that he has. He calls them platinums or whatever. And I'm assuming that's, rich people piercings because Lewis Hamilton is very, very wealthy. Anyway, he got his chains on. He showed up to the press conference with 7 chains on as well. The man, and that was obviously to prove a point or whatever. But nonetheless, Lewis Hamilton's pretty gung-ho about this whole hey, I'm going to need to wear my chains when I'm racing because that's a big part of my deal. That's a big part of how I play at such a high level. There have been other drivers who have come out and said I wear a cross when I'm driving, and me not being able to wear that makes me feel unsafe when I'm in the car, and it's kind of a weird thing, but it's also a very important thing. Lewis Hamilton also pointed out how he feels it is a regression of the sport if people cannot wear their jewelry, which is understandable as well. I can see where he's coming from with that. But nonetheless, the Florida Commission basically came out and said that the usage of jewelry during races would hinder medical staff from being able to render help as efficiently. And basically, Lewis Hamilton came out here and said, bury me with my chain on, then. Put me in the ground with my chain on, baby. Bury me inside the Louis store kind of deal. Anyway, he pointed out, like I said before, he's got piercings that he's gone into MRI machines, which, if you guys don't know, the M in MRI is magnetic. Magnetic resonant imaging, right? That's what MRI means? Anyway, let me check. Hold on. Let me I got to remember if I'm still stupid or not. MRI meaning magnetic resonance imaging in your face. Anyway, he has a platinum, which is he has platinum piercings, which cannot are not magnetic or as magnetic or whatever, and don't affect the MRI machine. Anyway, he pointed that out as a reasoning that he's been racing for 16 years and he's had MRIs multiple times over and he's never had an issue with his piercings that have been in, so he doesn't see why him wearing his chain when he's driving is going to be an issue for the Florida Racing Commission. And so far, from what I understand, the ruling is going to stay, and Lewis Hamilton's going to have to either not drive this upcoming weekend, which he, by the way, he was basically we got a backup driver for a reason. So I guess homeboy's getting a shot, whoever that backup driver is. Shout out to Florida, I guess. That's his new favorite state. They out here saying you can't drive with your chain on. They say you can't drive F1 with your chain on, and somebody got an opportunity to go out there and race in the premier racing league on the planet. So there you go. And Lewis Hamilton has said he will enjoy the sights and sounds of Miami if he's not allowed to race with his chain on. And hard to believe that Lewis isn't already doing that. He's a good looking guy, he's rich, and he's a professional athlete. I feel like he's enjoying all the things that Miami has to offer. And I would not want anything less for the true GOAT, the one true GOAT of F1 driving. When we come back, we'll talk about the worst thing that I saw in sports this week, and worst of the worst. Sad to say, it's kind of a heartbreaker. We're coming back on a hard one. Anyway, we'll be right back right here on the Brookboard Sports Podcast. Shout out to everybody listening at home. Shout out to Quick Kevin. He went out of his way to point out he missed the intro music. That is, of course, brought to you by Christina Gukis. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you go follow her on SoundCloud. It's Christina spelled the normal way, and her last name is Guckes. Shout out to her for providing all the music for this podcast, including this song you're about to hear, which is my second favorite song by Christina Gukis. The first one is, of course, Memories, which is the name of the theme song for the show. This is Humble Beliefs right here on the Brookboard Sports Podcast. All right, we're back here live on the Broke Boys Sports Podcast. That was sorry, hold on. What's the name of that song? Sorry, Humble Beliefs by Christina Gukis. Most of the songs by Christina, I just know every single beat to them. A lot of them don't have words or anything like that, but I enjoy them very much. So shout out to everybody who's in the chat hanging out with us here as I make my triumphant return to Broke Boy Sports status here. I continue to do the first part of the name, Broke Boy. The sports podcast part is always the one, that I got to work on a little bit. Anyway, we got to power through this because once again, your boy is, as always, running late to be hanging out with his girlfriend on Friday. So hopefully, I can tell you this right now. She's already eating dinner, so she won't be as mad at me. But nonetheless, we got a lot to work through here, ladies and gentlemen. We got a lot of stuff to talk about, and we can start here with worst of the worst. This is the worst thing that I saw in sports, well, I guess like the last couple of weeks. Anyway, it involves the NFL Draft. Some of you have probably seen this going around the internet, on social media and stuff like that, or some of you are very invested in this story like I am, but worst of the worst this week is Justin Ross. He is a Clemson wide receiver who signed as an undrafted free agent from the NFL Draft to the Kansas City Chiefs. He basically was a college kid, and he got to the point where like nobody he got they picked all the rounds and all the picks, and nobody selected Justin Ross. Justin Ross started off his freshman year at Clemson University. At Clemson, one of the best college football schools in the country, who would go, I think he's a national champion as well, because his first year, I think they won the title. Anyway, Justin Ross got 1,000 yards receiving, which is a huge, huge achievement to have in college because a lot of teams have so many different wide receivers, and there's so many different situations that prevent people from being able to have that kind of consistency, especially at the college football ranks. But Justin Ross is clearly like a next level talent and was able to maximize a lot of the time that he spent on the field because he got 1,000 yards while having under 100 catches, which is always very impressive because that means that you probably had a massive yards per catch average, and Justin Ross did. His second year around, he had 846 catches, and then his third year at Clemson, he had a stinger, which if you're not familiar with that, it's when you get hit and then your whole body kind of like goes numb or whatever, and it's basically like all your nerve endings, or one nerve ending got pinched and it sent the pain receptors to every single one of your nerve endings and numbed your entire body. It's a weird feeling. I've seen it happen to one of my former high school basketball teammates, Brandon, and it's a scary thing to see because it makes it look like you're paralyzed, but you're actually not. It's like a temporary situation. But Justin's stinger was a little bit different. He's had stingers in the past because football is a hard-hitting sport. He's a guy who jumps up in the air very high and runs very fast. And if you know anything about force equals mass times acceleration. If you have a lot of acceleration and a little bit of mass or a decent amount of mass, there's a lot of force exerted on your body and it makes things happen. So that's what happened to Justin Ross. He takes a hit one time. It's a stinger. He kind of deals with it, whatever you want to call it. He deals with it, goes to the doctor. They do an MRI apparently for the first time, or a scan on Justin Ross for the first time ever in his life, and they see that he has a rare spinal defect that has a name that I'm not going to try and pronounce. You can look it up yourself. A lot of people have written stories about it. There's ESPN, there's a Greenville News story as well about this, but he basically has a defect where like there's a part of his spinal cord that is pinching down infinitely on the rest of his spine, and it kind of hinders you from being able to take like great amounts of force. As a matter of fact, a lot of people speculated that Justin Ross would never be able to play football again after he was diagnosed with this injury, after playing his entire life with the condition, by the way. But nonetheless, they thought if he kept playing, eventually it would result in his permanent paralysis, which of course we all want to avoid at any given time, especially if it is avoidable. For some of us, we're not so lucky to have that situation, right? Justin Ross he takes off an entire year after getting a surgery that a lot of people deemed sketchy. Not sketchy necessarily, but a dangerous surgery that resulted in him having a disc removed from his spine and then having a plate put in as a substitute for the structure of his spine that the plate represents, right? So that's like a real thing. That makes sense on a high level, but to have it be the permanent structure that's in there, which is what made it risky, right? Especially when you're talking about your spine, that means, if you guys don't know, a lot of people's paralysis is defined by where a lot of people who are either paraplegics or quadriplegics, that is determined by where your spinal injury is, because essentially the higher your spinal injury is, the more mobility you lose in the rest of your body. So the replacement of the disc is dangerous because it could put Justin in a position where he eventually has the bones heal or some kind of other injury twist his spine in a weird way, and it permanently paralyzes him. That's like a big factor in this whole surgery that he had. It was risky. A lot of people did a lot of different scans. A lot of people tested all this stuff out. He had a surgery done in Pittsburgh by apparently the neurologist who is assigned, or the neurologist paid by the Pittsburgh Steelers. So a big deal. He would go on to miss the 2020 season, come back in the year 2021, which would be his final year, and at the college football ranks with Clemson. He would then subsequently, after having all that time off and basically going from 0 to 100, because if there's ever one, as a guy who has done it, Justin Ross actually has like a huge leg up over me, not only because he's a better athlete in general, but he basically went from sitting on the couch because he didn't have a choice, right, to imagine how perfect that dude's diet had to be for him to be able to go out there and not look like a slob like me. Anyway, he goes back out there. He returns to playing Division I, high-level Division I national championship contention football for the Clemson Tigers a year after Trevor Lawrence left. So this is the year that Clemson apparently fell off the wagon, even though they still had a 10-win season, which most teams would kill for. They had that whole situation go on. He would develop stress fractures in his foot that he would try and play through for the remainder of the season. He would get to the 10-week mark, and I think somebody got into his ear. He finally pieced it together himself personally, and he was just kind of like, yeah, man, there's a couple weeks left in the season. We're not in contention for the national championship game. I got to start getting ready for my preparation for the NFL draft, which means that I need to have my body in tip-top condition, which means I need my foot back. Because apparently, based off of what I read, they wrapped his foot up like he was a mummy all the time to prevent any further damage from happening to the stress fracture and spreading throughout his foot, which would eventually, subsequently result in multiple fractures in the foot and the breaking of a metatarsal in some situations. So he would miss the remainder of the season after the 10-week mark, but after the season was all said and done, it would also he would become the team's leading wide receiver in terms of yards and catches, which is wild to think about, that even though he missed multiple weeks in the back half of the season, that he was so dominant in just 10 weeks that he would be able to still finish his Clemson football career on top, almost in the just like he started it as a freshman all those years ago, right? So that happens. He goes to the NFL draft, does not get drafted. He signs as a UDFA, which is the acronym for undrafted free agent. He signs with the Kansas City Chiefs, and this is worst of the worst because, like, life is tough and life is hard, and a lot of things get thrown your way for whatever reason. And Justin Ross has been fighting things off left and right, and it just seemed really just unfair in general. I get it. The NFL is not about fair. They're about good and getting people that they can win championships with. And if they don't think they can win with Justin Ross, they can't win with they won't draft him. And nobody thought they could win with Justin Ross. And the Kansas City Chiefs saw an opportunity to go out there and really take a gamble on a guy who has the potential for a re-aggravation of a very, very potent injury, because now he's taken another step up to faster DBs, faster linebackers, faster D linemen, harder hitting guys and stuff like that. So more force, more twisting of the body, more potential injuries to go along with it, man. And he's risking it all to chase his dream, and I respect the hell out of that. But it was still a bummer for me personally to know that Justin has gone through so much to have another huge heaping of disappointment thrown upon him, because a lot of people were projecting him to be a late round pick, not completely undrafted. And he was also competing at a position that, he was also competing at a position Sorry, that was a Slack notification. Some of you, that probably traumatized you. He was competing at a position that had a ton of talent, like Drake London, George Pickens, Jamison Williams, a lot of guys who the Texans drafted a guy who currently has a torn ACL and he's recovering, right? A lot of talented dudes in general, and then plus a couple of them had injuries as well, but also just a draft that had a good chunk of people that you would consider to be very good at their position, and it's just tough to not see a guy who's had that level of dedication to the game and that kind of love for it. And I'm not saying that anybody else has any less love for it or anything like that, but it's tough to see a dude who went through all that to have to go through heartbreak of not getting drafted and then go into NFL camp in like the toughest spot possible, because being a UDFA, like, that means that you're on teams' radars, but they didn't want to invest anything in terms of, like, even a draft pick in you, which means that you're not going to get all the looks that you can possibly get. But I will point out there's something important to say about the Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver situation with the recent trade of Tyreek Hill. It has opened up a lot of opportunity across the board. Juju Smith-Schuster's only signed to a one-year deal there. Sammy Watkins isn't there anymore, so that opens up opportunities for people to come in and make something happen. I know Mecole Hardman's got a lot of pressure on him coming on this season because he's expected to take a huge leap forward. Mecole's shown that he can be a huge threat as a wide receiver on the outside and on the inside. He's got the size to be, he's got the prototypical size for a top tier wide receiver. He's just not in a situation where the team had to get the ball to Tyreek. The team had to get the ball to Travis Kelce. And now Mecole's got an opportunity to go out here and really emerge as a wide receiver. But a lot of other people have opportunities to work their way up the depth chart. And I can only hope that, Justin Ross is a guy that I'm rooting for, like, flat out, without question whatsoever. If there was ever one person to keep your tabs on this upcoming summer as NFL camps open up, mini camps, OTAs, all that kind of stuff like that, it is Justin Ross. He's had a lot of things go against him, and he still persevered through to get to this point, and I can't do anything but root for him. That's all I got for worst of the worst. Let's see what else we got on here. We got a lot of other stuff to talk about, too. We got fight stuff to talk about. This is actually about a week ago. Speaking of comebacks, we've already talked about my comeback to this show. I'd like to talk about some other comebacks as well. There were two that didn't happen. Some of you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. About a week ago is a segment where we talk about how vicious the news cycle is within the span of a week, how we can forget about absolutely absurd stories. Last week, with the first round elimination of the Brooklyn Nets and the first round elimination of the New Orleans Pelicans, both of those teams that had to play play-in games to get into the playoffs, right? The Nets got full-on swept, which I'm 99% sure that's the first time that's ever happened in KD's entire career, and that's how bad that situation was. Like, I feel like that's a perfect implementation of what has been going on with that team, because it's actually insane that a team with Kevin Durant would just get flat out 4-0 swept. But Ben Simmons apparently was set to play in Game 5 or Game 6 of the series, and that did not happen because... I'm sorry, he was set to play in Game 5, and they forced a Game 5, and they did not. So, interesting that would happen because what did happen is Ben Simmons is now under the age of 30 and going to get back surgery. I'm sure that's going to be fun. Wish him all the best. Like, I get a lot of you guys really specialize, especially on the internet, because it's easy to do that. You specialize in telling people what they are not as opposed to accepting them for what they are, because Ben Simmons is a very good basketball player. He's just not the basketball player that you want him to be. And that's okay. Hopefully Ben can get to a point where he accepts that he doesn't have to fulfill somebody else's thoughts and opinions of him as a person or him as a basketball player, and that he can see the level of greatness that he is at already. And I get it, Ben Ben doesn't have to be a perfect angel for people to give him the basic human decency of accepting him as a person, right? It's not like he went out here and murdered a child or killed a whale or clubbed a seal to death. He just doesn't shoot the basketball, but he does pass at a really high level, and that's actually more impressive, especially considering when you don't shoot the basketball, people know that you're going to pass the ball, and so they don't have to like fall for your shot attempts and stuff like that, and they can stay tighter to their man. Anyway, he's really good at driving to the hoop to get to the basket. He is a really high level defender, and he's good at passing the ball. All those things are also important for winning basketball games, but people only care about scoring buckets a certain way. And I get, as a basketball player, you should strive to be the best basketball player that you can be, but there's also something to be said of like having a style. Like, everybody's got a style. Like, Steph Curry does not play the same way LeBron James does. LeBron James does not play the same way that Joel Embiid does. Joel Embiid does not play the same way as Nikola Jokic, and they're both relatively the same size. So, just something to think about. Anyway, that was my comeback. That was about a week ago. Ben Simmons was allegedly coming back, and now he's going to get back surgery, which will probably keep him out for a while, because if there's anything that's finicky on the human body, it is a back. And I can only imagine how finicky it's going to be after surgery. So good luck to him, and wishing him the best, because that's like real life stuff. Like, that's trying to make sure that you can walk later on in life, right? Other stuff, Zion Williamson said he was coming back as well if the Pelicans forced a Game 7 versus the Suns. He was also apparently cleared to play in Game 6 and chose not to for some reason. My question for both of these situations was, why put that information out there? I understand with Ben Simmons, the Nets situation was Steve Nash said that for some reason, and then immediately tried to walk it back, which sounds like somebody from the medical staff told him something that he wanted to hear, told him that like Ben Simmons was, maybe potentially has a chance to come back, and then he said it into a microphone, and then it turned it into like, oh, now the media's running with it. We're like, oh, Ben Simmons, superstar Ben Simmons, all-star Ben Simmons potentially coming back, and that he's got to somehow play the savior role for a team that has got like a bunch of fundamentally flawed situations going on, and a lot of it stems from lack of chemistry around the court, right? Like, people were not getting the same shots that they were getting last year, and that's just not going to happen, right? Like, you're not going to be the same team you were a year ago. They lost Joe Harris, which is a massive part of why they struggled, because there's no way that you're telling me, like, with Joe Harris, with Seth Curry, Blake Griffin, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, Claxton out there, and Brent Barry, that they weren't going to be able to make something happen, right? But nonetheless, why both of these stories even became stories is just a massive question for me. Like, as a basketball fan, and it should be massive questions, like, as an organization, right? Like, even if Zion Williamson was 100% healthy and didn't play in a playoff game, like, as an organization, you don't want people to know that your star player chose to actively not play in a playoff game, that he could have played it. That people have been asking, is he going to make it back this entire season? Because remember, we started off the season talking about Zion coming back like early on in the year, missing like the first 25 games. Then it came like halfway to the season, the All-Star break, and then it kept getting pushed back further and further. And then a lot of people, basically past the All-Star break, every single media member, despite what people were saying on the internet, there's a lot of media members in the podcast sphere that were just like, yo, man, like, stop thinking about Zion. Stop thinking about Zion coming back and playing basketball. He's not. Like, just stop thinking about it. And so I got into that mode as well. And then, of course, other stuff, like videos start leaking, because that's what people love to do. Like, they kind of like want you to remember that Zion exists, but then on top of that, they also want you to pay attention to the fact that, Zion's not playing and that he could be playing, right? Like, he's working, getting back. It's a huge part of building the hype for the potential comeback story, because so much of what we do now is built around like creating narratives in terms of sports and all that kind of jazz like that. But nonetheless, like, videos of his recovery coming out, because I feel like if you're a regular person and you like broke your leg or something like that, you would put videos out of you walking for people to see, right? Like, for like family members on your social media. Zion just so happens to have a massive platform to go along with it, and I think Zion understands the ramifications of anybody posting any video of him, right? He also understands that people have been talking shit about his body the entire season for like no reason, because once again, Zion can be like 400 pounds and I guarantee you he can still 360 windmill dunk. Like, that's the kind of freakish level athlete that Zion Williamson is. And a lot of people really don't, they rather just sit there and make fat jokes instead of addressing the fact that, like, you're the actual loser in this situation, because Zion's rich and a super athlete. Like, it doesn't matter how fat you want to keep talking about that he is. He's still a better athlete than you and rich, bro. is cool, man. It really is. So, and on top of that, a lot of people are now talking about how, Zion said that he's 100% going to sign his extension when it's offered to him and all that kind of jazz like that. We'll see. I don't know if I would be too keen to come back to a city that made semi-racist caricatures of me, like fat shaming my body at the biggest celebration the city has to offer, right? Like at Mardi Gras. I probably wouldn't be too keen to work in that living environment or whatever. Anyway, moving on. That's all I have for about a week ago. Last week, Ben Simmons and Zion Williamson were allegedly coming back in this week. Ben Simmons is getting back surgery, and Zion Williamson did not play. So, we talking money or we talking money, ladies and gentlemen, because Canelo Alvarez is fighting for the first time in 3 years on Cinco de Mayo in Vegas. And if there's anything that says money, it's boxing, Vegas, and Cinco de Mayo weekend. And then, of course, Canelo Alvarez, the best boxer on the face of the planet as of now, with Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather effectively retired. Canelo Alvarez takes on the crown, if you will, of being the pound-for-pound best fighter on the planet. He's competing against Dmitry Bivol, who is a Russian fighter, number 2 light heavyweight in the world, and, of course, Canelo going for another strap. This will be the second time that he becomes the light heavyweight champion of the world if he wins this upcoming Saturday, and I can't wait to watch it. That's all I have for We Talking Money, and We Talking Money, just like boxing in Vegas on a big holiday weekend, in particular Cinco de Mayo, is like guaranteed money in the bank. Like infinite amounts of money. Vegas has to be buzzing right now because the fight's going down tomorrow. Media suggestions for this week, going to power through this one. Devante Adams did a one-on-one interview with one of the Raiders staff, one of the Raiders social media staff. Check that out. It's on their YouTube page. Also, teams are posting, in particular the Detroit Lions are posting weekly like miniature Hard Knocks episodes on YouTube again. Definitely check it out. Even if you're not a Lions fan, those are great insights as to what a team does and their approach to everything, especially around this time, because they do cover the draft in the course of those little Hard Knocks episodes. And it's not like they just follow them around and do goofy stuff. They legitimately are doing it as if it is Hard Knocks, but on YouTube. So it's pretty dope. Check it out. It's definitely 100% worth your time. I would also like to take this time in media suggestions to point out that the Las Vegas Raiders have fired their team president, and I'm sure there's absolutely nothing going on with that at all. It's not suspicious, especially since the word abrupt was used when describing the firing. Nothing weird going on there. We're going to take our final hydration break of the show. When we come back, we are going to talk about the WNBA, the UFC for one story, the NFL draft, and the NBA playoffs. And the show will be over. And I'll be done for the first time with this show in what feels like forever. It feels like forever, guys. I'm sorry. I'm back. I apologize. Laying in Your Arms by Christina Gukas for our hydration break right here on the Broke Boy Sports Podcast. Oh my God, we're back. Anyway, that was the last break of the show, so we're gonna crank all this stuff out. If you saw me during the hydration break on our video feed, which is of course on YouTube and on Twitch, you can watch me live as I speak about sports from my heart and from my soul. The only two places that I actually speak from, mainly because my brain doesn't. You know what? I'm not going to do that. I got to stop bad-mouthing myself as much, guys. It's not as funny if I take it too far. Anyway, Natasha Cloud, who plays for the Washington Mystics, she took off a year to work on activism in the Washington, D.C. area in the community, and she is back tonight. She has already murdered somebody, legitimately made a, I couldn't tell who it was based off the video because the WNBA, despite the fact being owned by the NBA, uploads absolute dog shit video quality on Instagram for some reason. But anyway, Natasha Cloud killed someone, and it's opening night in the WNBA, so RIP whoever that was she murdered, and hopefully her family wasn't watching. It was tough. It really was. Shout out Natasha Cloud, on and off the court, if you know what I mean. Beautiful woman. Really good basketball player as well. Let's see. What are we doing? What are we talking about? We're talking about sports, right? Other sports, other than the WNBA. By the way, we're talking about the WNBA because that's the next topic. I also saw that Kobe Bryant has secured the bag. He will be wearing the number 8 for the Seattle Seahawks. If you do not know who Kobe Bryant is, if you know who Sauce Gardner is, there was another corner on the other side of the field that also was pretty locked down for the Cincinnati Bearcats, and it was Kobe Bryant, who is, yes, named after Kobe Bryant, the man himself. He is wearing number 8 this season in honor of the man, in honor of his namesake. There we go. I said the phrase. I said it in honor of his namesake. The most dramatic way to say, the most dramatic way to phrase that. Anyway, I sent the Natasha Cloud video of her taking somebody's ankles to like 17 different people. So my phone will be buzzing for a little while here, and I do not apologize. It was worth it. Other stuff. The WNBA is underway for some reason. I don't know if I got like some kind of special deal when last year when the league was, I don't know, man. The league pass went from $17 to $25. That's a big jump. That's a big jump. 17 to 25 is a big jump. I don't care if it's just $8. $8 it goes a long way. That's more than half, or that's almost half. That's almost a 50% increase. That's a lot. I know if you got 17, you probably got 25 to spend on League Pass. You definitely should, especially if you live out of market from your favorite WNBA team like your boy does. Shout out to the Las Vegas Aces. We coming for that. We coming for that thing. We coming for that thing this season. And honestly, my friends are going to Vegas this summer, and I definitely want to go just so that I can go watch an Aces game. So here's hoping. Sue Bird is allegedly on her final run in the WNBA. I listened to a podcast today. She was on ESPN Daily with Pablo Torre, which, by the way, you should definitely check it out. They did an anniversary episode for the 20th anniversary since Allen Iverson had the We Talking About Practice press conference and broke down all the details about Allen Iverson talking about the death of his best friend and how the media members in the room like legitimately act like they didn't give a fuck for some reason, and all the other things that go along with it about Allen Iverson's impact on the NBA as a whole, Allen Iverson's impact on basketball as a whole, how Giannis Antetokounmpo got to meet the man who inspired him to play basketball, and Allen Iverson, I think in his wildest dreams, would have never imagined that he could have inspired so many people with the way that he played basketball, especially considering he played basketball because he was inspired by Michael Jordan and continued that legacy on. So it was really cool. Listen to that one. They also had a conversation. Pablo Torre talked to Sue Bird about her last run. He also talked to her about this hilarious ESPN only live stream that they did of the Final Four for the women's national championship game, where Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi were obviously playing a drinking game on air, and it was all that good stuff going. So it was like the Manning cast, but like even funnier because Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird have like unstoppable chemistry, and they also did not care if they got fired by ESPN, which is why they said cock so many times on air. Anyway, Candace Parker, now rumors are kind of swirling about, she answered a question on, I think it was on TNT, as always, on TNT, talking about her contract ends at the end of this season. She is going to have to make some decisions when this season is over with. So kind of giving, a little hint, wink, wink. It might be done. It might be a clean break and it might be over. The league expansion pressure is constantly increasing because we're at that time period where all of these really talented college basketball players who entered into the draft, because I think it was like an all-time high in the number of people who entered for the WNBA draft. And if you know anything about the WNBA, because of the size of rosters with the vets that are currently on teams, plus the draft picks that are selected and the spaces that are on rosters, you're only allowed to carry 12 people on a WNBA roster as opposed to 15 or 16 in some cases when it comes to the NBA, because you can file for exemptions and stuff like that. You're only allowed to carry 12 people. And because of that, a lot of first-round picks get cut. Like genuinely every first round picks, and there's two rounds in the draft, right? So there's only so many spots of people to get drafted, and then there's almost like no legitimate guarantee about people getting drafted. Like people getting drafted are going to remain on the team. That's always been something that's been really disturbing, because it creates an insecurity not only in the women's professional game, but it also there's no way that you're telling me that all those young ladies who play college ball are not worthy of playing for a WNBA team. They just need to play for another WNBA team. So there needs to be the pressure for league expansion continues to build as, Joe Tsai, who is the co-owner of Alibaba. There's a ESPN Daily about him. You should definitely check it out. It talks about his history and his connection with sports in general, and about his pressure that he's applying to the WNBA and the NBA, because he's a co-owner of the Nets as well. So check that out. Definitely worth your time to get an understanding of who Joe Tsai is, not only as a businessman, but how he perceives sports as well. What else? Oh, this is a cool one. The Phoenix Mercury announced their roster. Brittany Griner is on it for this season. Not only because Brittany Griner is, like the best center in women's basketball, but on top of that, I'm assuming it's a sign of support, because I think it's by default. If she was on the team, she would have made the roster. There's no question about that whatsoever. And it's a sign if she can see it, or if other people can see it, that the league is standing with her and supporting her, because they are. Other things that could I'm sure it's going to open a pathway for the media members of the WNBA and other media members for other publications like the Washington Post and all that kind of stuff like that across the world to write about Brittany Griner's situation. And the more pressure you apply through the media, the quicker that this can get resolved, right? And some people are media proof, other people are not. Other people don't like their name being mentioned in an article talking about, Brittany Griner's incarceration is associated with this person, right? Like, that's a thing. That's a real thing. But yeah, shout out Brittany Griner. If you don't know her situation, Brittany Griner, right when Russia was on the cusp of invading Ukraine, Brittany Griner, we all found out that Brittany Griner had been in Russian jail for 2 weeks. And now there is this massive push from political officials to try and apply pressure to the Russian government to have not only Brittany Griner released, but also it shed some light, because Brittany Griner is an international famous athlete. It shined a lot of light on other people who were seemingly wrongfully incarcerated in Russia, especially since Russia's so harsh on drugs. The threat to Brittany Griner's life is actually, like the rest of her life, is massive, and I hope she's okay, because let's be for real, Brittany Griner's tall as shit, and there's no way that a Russian prison is fitted for a woman who is almost 7 feet tall, right? So, and I'm sure she's not having a great time in a country where the primary language is one that she probably doesn't speak all that well, from what I understand about Brittany Griner. Not fun at all. And of course, just being black and abroad, it's always a constant threat to your life. Anyway, UFC stuff. Charles Cowboy Olivera, who has been stripped of his title for this upcoming weekend. He is still going to fight Justin Gaethje. He missed weight by half a pound, and the commission stripped him of his title. So now the way the fight is going to go down is it's going to happen. Only Justin Gaethje can be crowned the champion, though. So if Charles Olivera wins, his next fight will be he becomes the number one contender, basically. This is the number one contender fight, as if the belt doesn't exist. And a lot of people were already in the comments underneath the announcement from ESPN MMA and a bunch of other publications as well, talking about how this is a perfect foray for Charles Olivera and Conor McGregor to fight for the belt. So we'll see what happens this weekend. Justin Gaethje also might get that fight, and we'll see what happens. But once again, last time we heard from Conor McGregor, he's still using a cane from what I understand, because his leg got broken. Remember that? Like, truly iconic moment from Conor McGregor. Leg broken in half, sitting on the ground in the cage, leg broken in half, still talking shit about how he actually is the best fighter on the face of the planet. I was like, God damn. You know, I got a lot of things to say about Lucky Charms as a person and what he said in the past, but damn, that is very impressive to sit there with your leg broken and talk shit to the dude who just broke your leg. I gotta respect it. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know why, but I was just kind of like, man, that's kind of hardcore. Like, he's like, you know, you got your ass kicked in an ass kicking competition, and you still flicking off the person that kicked your ass. It's pretty, you know, spirit not broken. Hopefully he's all right, man, because you know, I don't wish ill upon anybody, especially people that I, even people that I don't like, which I don't care for Lucky Charms all that much. I've talked about that on this podcast before. Moving on to the NFL draft, a draft that has been called terrible anonymously in an ESPN article by a Power 5 head football coach, a Power 5 football coach. A draft. I just like to point this out. This is the one frustrating thing about the NFL draft as a whole. Yes, it's always cool to see people achieve their dreams because it's very rare in so many moments in life that you get to witness the moment that somebody's dream comes true. And honestly, if you could bottle that emotion, you'd become the richest human being on the face of the planet because you would have made the greatest drug known to man, known to humankind, known to reality, probably. The moment that if you could figure out a way to bottle the moment that somebody achieves their dream. And a lot of that happened on ESPN throughout the course of the NFL draft. And a lot of people took to the Twitter streets, and a lot of people took to, talking to media members about how this draft was terrible, despite all these things that happened. The draft that was technically the fastest combine on record, there were multiple players who ran 4.3s and 4.2s. There was this is like the fastest group of defensive linemen in NFL history, and a lot of people, they chalked that up to a possible change in the person who starts the timer for the 40-yard dash and everything like that for the first time in, I think, decades. There's a new person who's standing at the start of the 40-yard line right when guys are taking off and all that kind of stuff like that, and they think that he was maybe a little trigger happy or whatever, or a little late on the timer starting, even though the instructions are really simple. Your first movement towards the line triggers the timer, even though the timer is electronic. Like, there are electronic times that are being taken. The start is just digital, and a lot of people think that the digital start is a little bit sketchy sometimes or whatever it may be. There are coaches and scouts in the crowd with their timers in their hands doing it themselves, right? And some people came out and they're like, yeah, like they're talking like 0.2 seconds off. And 0.2 makes a big difference because a 0.2 is the difference between a 4, like being a wide receiver running a 4.4 and a 4.5. And whatever you have to say about, running a 4.4 and a 4.6. One is unacceptable. One is like, that's elite level speed, right? It's so weird, but that's the life we live. Anyway, that was what they came to the conclusion of about the 40-yard dashes at the combine. And a lot of those times actually came down when they ran them at their pro day, but nobody knew that, right? Because a lot of people only pay attention to the combine because it's a condensed sample size, even though the combine didn't get through all of its drills, which is really funny. It's a condensed area for all the prospects, which is why the combine exists, right? To have all the best prospects in one area as opposed to having to go all over the country or whatever. We had the most athletic football player of all time, technically, in Jordan Davis by people's athletic metrics, right? Jordan Davis is 100th percentile in like multiple categories and put on the greatest combine performance ever. So, no big deal. Objectively, people who are much smarter than me when it comes to the NFL draft in terms of understanding football pointed out that they did not feel like there was not a lot of first round grades, right? They felt like there was like 5 or 6 fewer first round grades than on an average year. So below average in terms of like top end talent for first round picks and all that kind of stuff, which really doesn't mean much, right? Because like, look, I know it sounds corny to say, and I know it sounds stupid to say, but I'm gonna keep saying it. The greatest football player of all time got taken in the 6th round, right? Like some of the greatest football players of all, there's never been a number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft to make it to the Hall of Fame. That's all you need to hear about when people tell you like, oh, it's, there's not a lot of high first round draft grades in this upcoming draft. And that's not to stick up for like any in particular player or whatever. It's just a general understanding of like, hey, these people who are doing these draft assessments are assessing people against talent that there's so many variables in terms of like the talent that these guys are facing. Like for instance, Cole Strange, last pick of the first round. A lot of people thought that was a crazy pick by the New England Patriots. A lot of things about the New England Patriots, their philosophy, one, they've had, the greatest offensive line coach of all time in their building for, I think, like 15 years in Dante Scarnecchia, right? So they may or may not have like a couple of notes on how to identify high-quality linemen, especially guys who are at the lower ranks of FBS or FCS football, right? So Cole Strange, like perfect example. Like he went to Tennessee Chattanooga. The level of competition that he faced on film is not going to be anywhere near on par with the level of competition that Evan Neal faced, especially considering, not only did he go to Tennessee Chattanooga, he was a guard. Guard is like one of the lowest valued positions in the NFL overall because a lot of people believe like you can draft tackles and when tackles suck at playing tackle, they just move them to guard and then all of a sudden you have a freak athlete playing the guard position for you. And I honestly believe that that's like a real thing. As a person who was a guard in college and was not very athletic, that makes a lot of sense. But hey, what do I know? What do I know? I just watch football on Sundays and try to understand formations and schemes. Doesn't mean that I know a shit ton of stuff about assessing players because assessing talent is the most difficult aspect of football in general. So, but yeah, like for the most part, like when people talk about like low amount of high first round draft grades, kind of can scoff at that a little bit, right? What they really mean and what a lot of this stuff is being said that really harkens back to is like the QBs were not the star of the show. There were no quarterbacks that were the star of the show. There was one quarterback taken in the first round. And actually, as a matter of fact, I would like to take a moment and round of applause. Round of applause for every single NFL team out there that didn't take the bait. There were NFL teams that, despite what you have to say about leadership, people that are in charge, they have a very nasty habit of being the team that when everybody else is trying to zig, they're trying to zag, right? And it sets them up to look stupid. On many different occasions, this has happened. And a lot of teams, collectively, I don't know if it's because groupthink takes a huge toll on a lot of different organizations, which is the thing. Like groupthink, like you hear, and this is another thing too, right? Like NFL GMs listen to sports talk radio. NFL GMs watch NFL Network. NFL GMs watch ESPN. Scouts watch ESPN and NFL Network. Groupthink is a real thing. Like people, whether it be either what they're seeing on Twitter, they're all on Twitter in some way, shape, or form, right? Because remember, you don't have to have an account to get on Twitter, guys. Don't forget that part. I have a friend who literally, like, he does not have an account allegedly, and he's on. He sends tweets all the time, right? Like he shares tweets all the time. Same thing. NFL scouts, NFL GMs, assistant GMs, offensive quality control personnel, head coaches, assistant coaches, offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators. They all are seeing the same thing. They're seeing the same stuff that dumbasses like me see on the internet, see on TV, read on NFL.com, right? Read in the paper. That affects their perspective on how they pick things. And so if you're just literally hearing from every single media source about how like, the quarterbacks aren't all that great this season, that's like a real thing that seeps into your mind. For some people, it takes a long time hearing that information. For me, I could have and for me with my poor assessment skills, I definitely was just like, oh yeah, no, I don't ever believe that. I'm already so reluctant to be like, this quarterback is 100% surefire going to be the guy. But some people are so willing to lean into that. I've never felt that about a quarterback. Legitimately, even guys, even like freak athletes like Cam Newton who play the quarterback position, where he had the perfect mix of the ability to scramble and make plays on the run and be able to throw the ball. Still didn't believe it because I have seen how the NFL affects people. And then on top of that, like I know situations that people get drafted into affect how well they play. And I feel like a lot of people skip out on that portion of it. They like when you're assigning bust, right? A lot of people don't really factor in like, hey man, how about we talk about how soon afterwards the head coach got fired from that spot? How about we talk about the other talent around the guy that you're calling a bust, right? Have you ever noticed how like all quote unquote NFL bust ever have always been on shitty teams at the time? And there never are busts that are on like reigning Super Bowl champion teams, right? Anyway, just something to point out. And I never have been, especially when it comes to the NFL, I've never been a believer that one player can turn everything around. And a lot of people believe that that's the case because a lot of you guys really think that it was just Joe Burrow that was the reason the Bengals made it to the Super Bowl last year, and that's hilarious to me. It's not even close to true. Well, whatever. So that was the thing about me. It was like a lot of people were trying to beat around the bush in terms of like, oh, I don't care about this draft because there's no high-level quarterbacks. And I'm like, bro, like I actually appreciate this draft because it means that there are high-level defensive players who already get paid on the lower end of the scale, right? Like out of all the positions on average, other than pass rusher, defensive end, and stuff like that, even at D tackle, it's on the low end because there's only it's Chris Jones and Aaron Donald that get paid at like a crazy high level in the current NFL. And so outside of pass rusher and maybe cornerback, right? Every other position gets paid significantly lower than the average offensive position, especially polar opposite offensive positions, right? I think that this draft was a lot of guys getting picked where they should have gone. There's a lot of players that didn't get their draft positioning affected by bias. They didn't get their draft positioning affected by people reaching for quarterbacks, right? And that I appreciate that a lot. One, because everybody thinks they're going to find the next Josh Allen. They're not, right? There is going to be a guy who, and I know it's hard to believe, it's hard for me to even conceptualize, there's going to be a guy who's better than Josh Allen. Just like at one point, none of us really, we really struggle with the concept there are going to be guys who are better than Ben Roethlisberger, right? Same thing with Tom. Like at some point, there will be a football player better than Tom Brady who's in a situation better than Tom Brady's situation and surpass him, which is crazy to think about right now because like my brain can't fathom that, but it is going to happen. That's the one thing that I wanted to point out. That's like the big thing that I wanted to point out about the situation as a whole, man. It felt like the defensive players didn't get screwed over. It felt like the offensive players didn't get screwed over. It felt like people who had production at the college level, who were assessed to be like high-end draft picks, did not have their draft pick slots affected by quarterbacks. And I already am a person who I rage against the machine. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I don't know that quarterback has a massive influence on the success of a team. I'm also not a person that believes that quarterback is the only position that has an influence on the success of a team. Because I think a lot of people like to circumvent all the situations that go right for a lot of quarterbacks, and that there are quarterbacks who cover up mistakes, and there are quarterbacks who are a part of a group of players that are already playing at a high level, and they play at a high level as well. Like, for instance, like Matthew Stafford, right? Matthew Stafford clearly was a massive step forward over Jared Goff. But to sit there and argue that they could have done it, they got to the Super Bowl because of Matthew Stafford is insane. They have the best defensive tackle that has ever lived, probably one of the best pass rushers that has ever lived. They have one of the best cornerbacks of our time, plus like a bunch of other positions that were playing at a crazy high level. They have Odell Beckham Jr., for God's sakes. Like that's what I'm saying. A lot of people tend to be like, we got to get the quarterback first. And I'm like, well, I mean, do you? I mean, you need a lot of things at one time. And I feel like a lot of people sit there and they think about, I need a quarterback right now, as opposed to you need a lot of things at once, right? Like you don't need just Joe Burrow. You need Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and you need amazing performance from the defense throughout the course of this season. That's what happens. Whatever. Anyway, I guess that makes me the dummy in this situation. But I was really glad to see a lot of teams not fall for the bait. And no offense to the quarterbacks, because of course I want everybody to go out there and make their bread. But one thing I have learned is that weeping for quarterbacks is never gonna be my thing. Like, being sad for quarterbacks is never going to be my thing. Being sad that quarterbacks never get their money is never going to be my thing. Being sad that linebackers don't get the pay that they deserve. being sad that like running backs still are in this situation where people try and pretend that like once in a generation running backs are not worth paying. Those will be the players that I feel like the suffering is going to, because quarterbacks have everything going for them, and they don't need my pity. They don't need my sympathy. Other stuff that happened in the draft, A.J. Brown got traded to the Eagles. Massive upgrade. Of course, this is a do or die season for Jalen Hurts in a lot of people's opinion, because a lot of people thought he should have, quote unquote, died last season. I disagree. I feel like Nick Sirianni, and I think a lot of people who watch the actual Eagles games would agree, Nick Sirianni was out of pocket for the kind of situations that he put Jalen Hurts in. Just facts. Hopefully they can take a big step forward this year with Devontae Smith and AJ Brown out there, and not have to worry about drop situations like they did with a lot of other wide receivers. And then, of course, the longer the offense gets stay out there on the field, the less pressure the defense feels to go out there and pitch a shutout, which is pretty much what they had to do all season. If you watched any of the Eagles games, the defense was asked to do too much every single week. Even when the offense scored a bunch of points, the defense was asked to do too much. And they got smoked by the Buccaneers, which is not surprising because the Buccaneers have elite level talent at multiple positions. So we'll see what happens this upcoming season. Nick Sirianni getting another shot at it because he's going to have to change. Honestly, he's a head coach. I'm sure he knows. He's going to have to change his approach to how he assesses and utilizes the personnel on his team, because it felt like for a good chunk of time that he wanted to run his system. He didn't want to run a system that worked for the personnel. And as a guy who coaches a very non-mainstream sport, who wants to do things that are quote unquote the meta within the realm of the sport, when I'm talking about Quidditch and stuff like that, it's hard to realize that you have the team that's different and act like you have the team that is different. And so, hopefully they can figure it out, because obviously they're a team that has to run, that has to be balanced. They're a team, they're not a team that can go out there and sling the ball 40 times. And maybe they will be with the adjustments that he makes, because a lot of the times the biggest issues that it was predictable stuff. And that was the issues. The windows were tight because everybody knew what they were doing. Other stuff, NBA playoffs, then we're done. I'm going to give some quick notes about each one of these. I'm not going to sit here and try and break down every single one of these series. Right now, Heat Sixers is going on, and score update. Sorry. Trying to figure it out. Anthony Pettis got a dub against Miles Price. Yeah, so the 76ers won Game 3, and apparently Joel Embiid posted a meme from The Wire. It was the... You know which one it is. We're back. We're back like we never left. Anyway, Heat versus Sixers. So this is an interesting situation. One, the Heat, obviously everybody's made a big deal about how nobody talks about the Heat. That's like become their thing. When people talk about the Heat, everybody talks about how nobody talks about the Heat. That's like the meta of the meta, like super meta. I can respect it. I respect the hustle. The process is on the line. This seems like the last breath and the last gasp of the process, because Joel Embiid is literally, if Joel Embiid they won Game 3, and I expect to see a report tomorrow that Joel Embiid got hit by a bus with the kind of luck that he's had this playoff series, right? Other than that, it's really sad to see a guy like James Harden be in a situation where he clearly looks like he's either still hurt from a massive lingering injury that has not been addressed for years, in particular since he started with the Nets, right? Like when he was with the Nets, he had the hamstring injury. He went out there and he played even though he shouldn't have. And then that turned into like a knee injury type deal. Or the other thing is happening with James Harden, where every great player eventually just runs out of gas because it's hard to play absolutely elite NBA basketball at that level for that long. And I guess especially since James Harden hasn't missed the playoffs in like James Harden's been in the playoffs, played at least one round of the playoffs for what? I want to say like 10 straight years, right? Got to be close to it. And that takes its toll. It's just like LeBron James with the whole like remember that year, or remember that series of years, like James. Okay, so like LeBron James made it to the finals like 8 straight years, right? And then he had Olympic years. So he made it like Olympic year to Olympic year with 8 straight finals in it, going like to game 6 and game 7 in the finals all the time. So he played the most amount of basketball possible most of the time for a long period of time, and he is the bionic man. Like, he's indestructible, right? Even though he missed games this season, he's basically indestructible. Like, scientifically, LeBron James is indestructible. So maybe, eventually the game passes us all by, and hopefully that's not what we're witnessing from James Harden. I know a lot of people got a lot of stuff to say about James Harden in terms of how he does business, in terms of how he holds an agent and stuff like that. Me personally, James Harden has been and brought me great joy as a Rockets fan, and I am always going to root for his success because I'm not a dumbass wannabe Fairweather Rockets fan who thought that he was wrong for when the Rockets chose to intentionally tank the team by firing Mike D'Antoni, firing literally everyone except James Harden. And I kid you not, guys. I've been more staunch in this idea ever since, right? I was in the barbershop, and this is why you should not. Everybody idolizes the black barbershop. There are certain situations where a black barbershop is a great environment for a young man to learn how to be a man. And it all solely depends on whoever walks in that door. Because I spent a lot of time in my life talking about sports in the barbershop. And it has definitely molded the way that I view sports. And luckily, I've been able to catch some stupid habits that I've picked up over the years to counteract like certain types of people, right? Like, there are definitely people who come into the barbershop who want to talk sports who do not watch the games. But they think they can talk about it because they listen to radio shows. They watch Undisputed, all that jazz like that. This is like months ago, went into the barbershop, got a haircut. There's a dude in there telling me that James Harden is a traitor or James Harden sucks because he wanted to quit on the Rockets. And I was like, so Daryl Morey gets fired. Mike D'Antoni gets fired. They continually tell Mike D'Antoni he's not getting re-signed. The current owner of the team is not talking about like giving James Harden an extension, right? They traded away PJ Tucker. They've traded away Russell Westbrook. And you expect James Harden, because this is the one thing that baffles the shit out of me. People talk about how James Harden is not a winner. And I'm like, well, James Harden left the Thunder to get more money, right? He left the Rockets because they were going to be losers. And they were. The Rockets were the worst team in the NBA this past year. The Rockets were one of the worst teams in the NBA last year. He didn't want to be associated with a losing team. So he went to a winning team, thus making him a person who wants to win. He just doesn't want to win with your team. He just didn't want to win with your team. And he came back with this whole like, well, did you see what happened with this is last year. And he's like, well, did you see what happened with the Phoenix Suns? Chris Paul stuck with the team that didn't look like they was going to be like, did you think the Phoenix Suns were going to the finals? And I was like, no, but I knew the Phoenix Suns were going to be a good basketball team. Chris Paul just doesn't dude, the season before he got to the Suns, Chris Paul carried an Oklahoma City Thunder team that was trying to tank to the playoffs and almost got the Rockets. Almost kneecapped the Rockets. Like that just doesn't happen. Chris Paul shows up somewhere winning is not too far behind, right? Devin Booker has been a guy that we've talked about becoming one of the big superstars in the NBA for a really long time. Deandre Ayton is a true 5 big man in a world where a true 5 can actually make and carve out a massive living in the NBA. These are not wild things that happen. Miles Bridges and Cameron Johnson emerging as like legitimate top tier defenders and then really good 3-point shooters. Didn't see that coming to get them to the point where they could boost themselves to go to the NBA Finals, right? Didn't see that coming. But nonetheless, that team was going to be good. He's talking about like, oh, he should have stuck around with the Rockets team that was intentionally designed to tank, by the way, and seeing what would have happened and then got traded. And I'm like, no. Like, you don't understand how the NBA goes, and it shows. And once again, I asked him, I was like, do you think that every team in the NBA is trying to win the championship every single year? He's like, I think they're trying to get on the path to win every single year. And it was hilarious to me because I was like, have you watched the Detroit Pistons game in the past like 3 years? I was being generous. I could have said 5 or 6, but I didn't. And I was like, have you seen the Oklahoma City Thunder the last 4 years? Have you seen, like, legitimately? And he's sitting there. He's like, what? He's like, what? He's like, who's trying to win the championship? Who's not trying to win the championship? And I list off like 7 teams in the league. The Sacramento Kings. And I list off like 7 teams in the league. And he just keeps reiterating the same thing over and over again. He doesn't have a new argument because I already beat him. And I already beat him in that argument. Anyway, that's a PSA on like why you shouldn't go to the barbershop kids and have discussions with people who don't. Like, I hate to sound like a douchebag when I say this, but like, I think I can say you shouldn't talk to people about sports that they don't watch and be a totally reasonable person about it. Like, for instance, my barber said some real asshole-ish things about the WNBA, a league he has not watched since the Houston Comets were a team. And he immediately, when I brought up how I was watching the WNBA finals last year, he was like, "Oh, that shit ass stuff," and and all this kind of. He said like the typical stuff, and it like once again has like legitimately made me question why I get my haircut by this guy. And then he also butchered my haircut like the last time I went and got a haircut from him. So your boy might be in the market for a new barber, because like at the very least, if you're gonna like, yeah. So anyway. You can't be a hater and a bad barber. Pick a struggle, you know. But yeah, he said that, and I was like, "When's the last time you watched a WNBA game?" And he was like, legitimately said the 90s, and I was like, "Cool." So like, your opinion doesn't count. Like, you can have an opinion, but like, don't expect people to respect it. So you know, that's a free lesson, kids. Don't let those kind of people have any say. And that's actually some people's perspective on why social media is a bad place. And I'm not popular enough on Twitter and like all the other social media apps to really get popping like that, but I can see where you're coming from on that one. Anyway, that's Suns Dallas. I'm kidding. But yeah, the Phoenix Suns look like they're cooking again, man, especially considering they have now overcome, I would say, 2 pretty big stints from Devin Booker in terms of injury. They had a huge chunk of time where he just wasn't available to play. They overcame a Chris Paul stint of injury, and now, Devin Booker pulls his hamstring in the first round. They are able to beat the New Orleans Pelicans, the young upstart whippersnappers, if you will. And then now the Dallas Mavericks, a team that has not been with Luka at the very least to the second round of the playoffs, mainly because it's Luka, and it was supposed to be Luka and KP. Remember that? Remember it was supposed to be Luka and Kristaps Porzingis, and how magical that combination was supposed to be like 3 years ago, and it just never panned out. But now it's Luka and Spencer Dinwiddie, who the Suns have kind of shut down because, like, once again, Bridges is cooking. And on top of that, like, Devin Booker and Chris Paul are a hard offensive duo to overcome for most people, mainly because Devin Booker is a walking bucket, and the Mavericks only have one of those guys, and Chris Paul, too, can become a walking bucket, which is why he had that crazy-ass 12 for 12 night. Don't forget that. Like, Chris Paul having, like, a perfect night from the field to close out a playoff series. Subtle flex for a future Hall of Famer. One of the best of our time. Bucks versus Celtics here. The only commentary I have is, like, one, they've both blown each other out so far, and that's fun to me because one of my favorite NBA playoff series ever was the Lakers with Kobe Bryant versus the Celtics in the Big Three. Basically, it just became like a blowout fest. It was basically like game 1 would happen, the Lakers blew them out. Game 2 would happen, the Celtics would blow them out. And it was just about who could hurt them the worst on the scoreboard. And it would be like 20-point loss. It would be 25-point deficits at one point during the game, and both teams were still going as hard as possible because it was not about like the scoreboard. It was about breaking your opponent's spirit, and that's like one of my favorite things in sports. Not breaking people's spirit, but like that was one of my favorite like competitive moments in sports because it seemed like no matter what the score showed, people were playing like it was a one-possession game, and I enjoyed that a lot. But that, hopefully, fingers crossed, Bucks Celtics becomes one of those situations because now it's Jason Tatum versus another true superstar, right? Like another guy going for the crown of being the number 1 basketball player on the planet, as we think we are in the twilight of LeBron James's era as the king of basketball globally, right? Bucks Celtics. It's Giannis versus Jason Tatum, 2 of the most prominent guys in the league, and then of course, like the Bucks have one of the best defenses in the NBA, and they're showing it, like they're showing it. So it'll be interesting to see what the Celtics do adjustment wise. Grizzlies versus Warriors. You're actually witnessing something truly beautiful in the world of sports, something truly beautiful and horrifying all at the same time in Grizzlies versus Warriors. You're witnessing the death of a star, and I'm not saying a star in terms of a player, a death of a star, like a fading star, and another brighter star consuming it to emerge. That's what I think is happening. I guess we'll find out. But yeah, the Grizzlies, led by Ja Morant, who dropped 47 points on the Warriors in Game 2 after a first quarter where basically the Grizzlies just fist fought the Warriors, as close to fist fighting as you can get in the modern day NBA, to the point where somebody ended up with a shattered elbow. Gary Payton II, who I hope has a speedy recovery, has a broken elbow after a straight flagrant 2 an ejection from Dillon Brooks. Understandably so. He did not make a play on the basketball. And then Draymond Green had one of those fouls that, like, one of those YMCA fouls where, like, you're going up for the drive and the person who's in front of you doesn't have the juice in their legs to jump, so they just grab you out of the air and they're like, you get your foul. Like, they fouled you on purpose, but they fouled you to stop you from scoring, not to hurt you. And then you go back to, you realize that, like, you can just foul everybody infinitely in the paint, and they'll just have to go back to the top of the key and try and figure out another way to get to the hoop. Anyway, that was amazing. Grizzlies versus Warriors is truly, it's like the old lion versus the young lion, and the winner could be crowned the future king. Also, not surprising whatsoever that the most brutal series is happening once again in the grindhouse. All these years later, after Mike Conley and all those guys, Zebo and everybody are gone, the violence remains in the grindhouse. The violence lives on for the Grizzlies, and I love it. But yeah, that's all I got for the NBA playoffs, which means that's all I got for this show, ladies and gentlemen. An hour and a half on the podcast. Let's see how long the actual stream was. The stream, my bad, Twitch, what you got for me? Hour 47, not too bad. Not too bad for the first time back. I will be back again. So don't worry, guys. Don't worry. I will return actually, we're coming back Tuesday. I don't know if we're going to do study hall again. We might actually do a formatted show on Tuesday. It just will be a little bit more loose. Anyway, shout out to everybody who hopped into the chat now or in the future. I appreciate every single listen, every single like. Make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you follow on Twitch at Broke Boy Sports Podcast on both of those platforms. Hit me up on Instagram at The Ashton Forever. Hit me up on Twitter at FB_playbook. You can also follow me on TikTok at The Ashton Forever as well. I have 3 TikToks that I need to do. One of them I actually completed, and then my phone died right when I was about to post it, and it deleted it out of my phone. So I just haven't worked up the courage and the gumption to redo that podcast, redo that TikTok, because I had to do voiceovers. I added actual script onto the screen, and I had to edit 40 minutes worth of road trip videos. Anyway, shout out to everybody once again. Appreciate you for joining with me, sticking with me as we trudge forward in our attempt to take over the podcasting world, just until we get rich and then leave immediately, or until they start letting us into cool stuff for free. Whatever comes first. I'm out. Wash your hands, wash your ass. If you have the ability to wash your whole body, please do it, for you and for me. And on that note, go home, Roger. Yo, shout out everybody on the stream. I just ended the podcast. Oh, we gotta hit that ending screen. I forgot. Don't worry, I got it. Let me finish the music for you. There we go.